way to this Regulatory and Compliance Committee meeting, I just need to remind you all that we are accompanied by some virtual members and we are live streaming to YouTube. Microphones are above you, so side conversations and paper rustling can be picked up, so please still no side conversations. And we operate under standing orders, so there's been no requests for deputations from members of the public. Reminder, phones are silent, and we're going to keep our speaking times to 3 minutes. Thank you. And I will open officially with a karakia, and the reason that I open with a karakia is because it's a privilege to speak our te reo Māori language and to set the mood of our hui. And so I'm going to use the one that I always do, which Councillor Tepania has already used today, but I'll use it as well. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina, ke uta kia mā taratara ki tai. E he akiana o te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, te he moia. Okay, so to start us off, we first of all have any apologies received for our meeting. We'll take the Mayor's apology before our meeting. I haven't got any others. Have a mover for that, please? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Research. And no declarations of interest. And then we're on to confirmation of previous minutes. Sounds like somebody's having a party somewhere. Can you hear that going? It's not in here. Can I have a mover? Happy to move, Madam Chair. Okay, so I've got Councillor Smith and was that Councillor Research? Collard, thank you, Councillor. Any matters arising from the meeting held on the 23rd of March, please? I'll take that as a no. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you. So moving swiftly on to item 4.2, we've got a report on parking. And Dr. Dean, yes. Hang on, I'll just have a mover and a seconder first, please. Belinda, Member Ward and Councillor Smith, thank you. All yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just by way of introduction, this item makes 2 recommendations and it relates to delegations from the NZTA for parking enforcement on state highways, and then also is a recommendation around a trial of parking enforcement which also involves expired licenses and warrants of fitness. So those are the 2 parts to this report. As you are aware, I think all of the members of this committee were at the committee this morning, the Statutory Committee, and the cross-referencing and the collaborative work that's happened between Rochelle's team and the other teams in strategic planning and policy, and also with the roading engineering people within the infrastructure group, has allowed some collaborative work and alignment, and that will continue through the promulgation or the development work related to the bylaw. So that is an ongoing piece of work, but it doesn't impact the approach that we make to NZTA for those delegations. But I'll pass to Rochelle to talk to the report or answer any questions that the members may have.
And before Rochelle takes questions, I just want to read the recommendation because I forgot to do that, sorry. The recommendation is that the Far North District Council A makes application for the delegation to enforce stationary parking offences on State Highway from Whakakotahi, the New Zealand Transport Agency, and the Regulatory Compliance Committee recommends to Council that it commences a trial period of enforcing stationary vehicle warrants of fitness and registration offences across the district, So you'll see it's in two parts because one is within operational jurisdiction and the other is needing a council decision. So, Rochelle, did you want to speak or do you want to just take questions?
I'm happy to just take questions.
Yeah. Okay, who's first? Councillor Tollard.
Yeah, what I'm interested in terms of the delegation, it's noted that the fine amount is $200 or whatever it is. And down further on number 2, state highway delegation, potential additional income. Does that mean if there are fines, we keep the money to pay for the resource, or are we on a commission? Or
So if we receive delegation for state highway, we are entitled to keep any infringement monies from that.
so that would be the funding of the resource.
For delegation,
Yeah.
it would allow us to do infringements and put parking restrictions on state highway. In relation to the infringements that come from that parking enforcement, yes, we would be able to keep the funds from any infringements that do get paid, and potentially, you know, it could include the increase in resources in the future.
Councillor Visage?
Yeah, I had a very similar question, but one other point is that once active monitoring commences, is further down on the following page, page 20, expired often registration will be given a 1 month grace period for the expiry date before. Is that something that's normally done or something that we are offering that's different? And if that's the case, and then they get it sorted, I presume there's no funding as well. No fine, no funding. How does that? What does that mean?
So for the grace period, I can only speak to what I know. So in Whangarei, they do give a grace period for registrations and warrant of fitness. The reason being for warrant of fitness is that you can't see the back of the sticker. So there's always a date on that sticker. So it could be the 30th of April or it could be the 1st of April. So you give that whole month. And then you give what we would do would be putting a warning or a reminder notice under somebody's windscreen just to let them know that that's coming to an end. But you wouldn't go into infringement mode. So if it was April, you would infringe in the June because you've given them a good time to actually get that warrant or registration paid.
It's only those ones that are actually obviously out of date that you do, that you can. And one other sort of supplementary question, Madam Chair, very quickly, is the consideration being given to charging for parking, because that seems another very good income stream and a potential fixing business.
You mean like parking meters and everything like that?
Modern technology don't need parking meters anymore, so it's not so hard to lose.
I'm not too sure. That would need to come through from the roading department in regards to sort of whether or not there was going to be any modern day.
Yes, thank you, Rochelle. That sits outside the
Follow-up.
report. You can talk to someone like Keith offline, perhaps through Sean. Any other questions, Councillor Visage?
No, I'm good.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this report, Rochelle. My questions were around the second part of the resolution to commence a trial. I really support the principle of a trial to understand what that might look like. My questions were, the first one was around the resourcing. So will the trial be run within the current enforcement resourcing as well as the infringement issuing resourcing, obviously taking into consideration the grace periods and things that may result in increase? So just wanting confirmation that was current resourcing.
Yes, it would be current resourcing. We do have a parking warden who has a regime that they go through, and it would be part of that normal monitoring that they are doing currently. They would just include warrant of fitness and registration checks within that. As I've mentioned into the report, there would be an educational lead up perhaps a bit of media, putting out notices in regards to, are you aware that your registration, this is, you know, solely around traffic, you know, and safety on our roads, making sure that, you know, everyone is safe in a vehicle and on our roads, and sort of putting that messaging out there, how to go about getting their warrant fitness and registration perhaps, and also the consequences of not doing that. And so we would then get a feel really for how much of a need there is within the community perhaps of to sort of increase any parking enforcement in the future. And so we would sort of require the current warden to provide a report of where we're going with this and what they're seeing, the feel in the community. Obviously this is only on our roads, so we wouldn't be going into private car parks or anything like that, and the parking warden at the moment is going to our urban areas, which shows you that the vehicles, you know, if they didn't have a current warrant of fitness, they've driven to those areas on our roads in an unsafe vehicle. So we're not going into the farm hacks that are just dropping kids at the bottom of the road perhaps or anything like that. These are in our urban areas, and that wouldn't change initially.
That's great, thank you. My second question, Madam Chair, was just references a review process. I was just wanting to get a bit more understanding of what that review process would look like. Is that a governance involved review process, or is it an internal operational review?
We would like to have monthly reports, as I said, from the parking warden, and I guess it's really looking at that 6 monthly review that I would bring an information report back through to the committee to sort of give an update on what we are seeing out there in the community and whether or not this is something that we wish to continue. Do we want to trial it, you know, for a longer period, or is this something that we have a real need within our community?
That's great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Any other questions? No. Oh, yes, Member Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had, I guess, a concern at the top of page 19 with the wording for Interstate Highway or Portion State Highway, where it makes good sense for council to perform that role. It makes good sense. Doesn't really sit with me. We either have marked car parks with a bylaw in place or we don't. I just want a clarification on, I'm aware, I can give you an example, in front of the Maritime building in Play here, we have quite a hatched area of a mismatch of activities, hawkers licences, shopkeeping hawkers licences. We used to have cruise ship traffic, we don't now, but that may come back. Just some clarification around the fact that the parking warden in the past, when the bylaw was in place, was actually instructed not to ticket anybody in that area, that whole area outside the Maritime building, which is road reserve. So I really just want, and the community knows that, so it's been abused obviously because they know that you can just park there and no one can be ticketed there. So just clarification around and tightening up of that, you know, that parks with signage will be monitored and will be enforced. So that the community awareness is there and makes good sense. Can we please see some visual wording?
Rochelle?
Through the chair. So forgive me, the wording of good sense was taken from the delegation agreement from Kotahi, and that is around that they will delegate the powers to council where it makes good sense that they have those powers. So within the delegations agreement, there's more than just parking, stationary vehicle offences. There was road closures, those sorts of things. So that's where that wording comes from. In relation to sort of where parking enforcement can be done, I think there will be the ability when the new parking bylaw comes through where input can be made into where those restrictions need to be in the future, and where those restrictions are is where the parking enforcement officer will then go to. So they can only go where those enforcement measures are at the moment.
Great question. Okay, I just have one comment about the trial, and it was taking into consideration the fact that Warren Fitnesses have been a little delayed with the congestion that happened with COVID last year. So I know we're probably looking at starting right at the beginning of the new financial year, but there will be a grace period.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, what Rochelle mentioned before, the softer approach in terms of educating and giving people early advice that this is changing, along with that, the grace period, I think there'll be more than adequate allowance for people to familiarise and gear up to this the possibility of being infringed.
Okay, thank you, Lee. All right, so we'll put the report. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you very much. Now we're moving to item 5.1. That the Regulatory Compliance Committee received the report Resource Management Act Reform Update. Have a mover, please. No.
Happy to move.
Thank you. And I'll take Councillor Clinton. Thanks very much. And were we going to, do you have any questions, or Louise, did you want to speak to this?
I don't have anything to speak to this.
Okay.
Questions.
Anybody have any questions of the report? Yes, Councillor Vucic.
Yeah, it's certainly a huge change that's actually happening, and I don't, looking at this report, I probably can't fully appreciate what impact it's going to have. I'm just wondering in what forum can we actually look at that. I know the government's doing this and this is what's going to happen, but when I look at it, there is obviously climate change is very large, and the RMA changes in many ways, nature changes significantly. I just don't know what it's going to mean for us, and I'm just hoping for an answer somewhere along there. Maybe that's going to have to come out as it's implemented, and we'll see how it's looking like. But it looks like it's a huge change for local government and New Zealand as a whole. Is that a fair statement to say?
And were you asking about resourcing in this space?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the risk
And the risk.
and other
Okay.
things.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I think if I could lead off by saying that we have a new district plan looming towards the end of the year. With that, we'll see significant implications for our resource consenting function. They'll be assessing both in terms of in the lead up to adoption of the new district plan. We'll be seeing assessment of resource consents against the existing district plan, and also in terms of the new. And our agents and applicants externally will likewise be doing that. So we believe there may be a slowing up of the process somewhat because of that, due to extra consideration. Along with the new legislation covered in this report, there is an element of the unknown in terms of what it might mean exactly. We would make further reports and provide updates to this committee in terms of what that looks like in real terms, in terms of the implications for implementing the new legislation. It is early days. There's also a suggestion that there may be a regional approach or arrangement for resource consenting. What that might look like, also unknown at this point. So I think this is just the front end of the process of acknowledging new legislation that's coming, and what that might mean down the track. As we find out more, get more information on this, we have to consider what the implications are. We do know that the resource consent function at the moment is doing a marvellous job within the existing resources that they have. They've come a long way from resource consents, compliance, statutory compliance, not that long ago, 2 years or so ago, at 34%. It's right up to in the 90s, very close to the 100% compliance. So that in itself is a great achievement. The volumes of consents, I think at the last committee, Rochelle spoke about the increase in the number of consents. Again, that brings its own challenges, and they're all different. Some are relatively straightforward, others are more complex, but the team is managing to, to work through those and to achieve almost the 100% compliance. So to the question about the changes and the implications, we would have to provide updates, because right now, if you asked us what that looks like in specific terms, we wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Dean. I think Felicity wanted to say something, but I've got Councillor Clinton first.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wonder, I'd like to ask a question which is asking you to make a subjective judgment, which may not be fair, but I'm just curious, after the 91 reform, with the RMA coming in, the Planning Institute, in my opinion anyway, wasn't particularly welcoming of the change, and there was even, dare I say, a level of resistance. I just wondered, did you glean from the Institute a sense of their position around the proposed changes, whether it's bring it on or is it denial or something in between? I'm genuinely interested in how the industry is, or the Institute is responding.
My personal impression of the people that were present at the conference was that they accepted change needed to happen, and the Minister himself said that this will only be effective if we have a culture of getting behind it and implement it. The concern that we would have is whether we've got the capacity to understand what the changes will mean and respond. Does that answer your question? I can go into that a bit more if it has quite answered.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, it's a big question. I know it's
Thank you. Councillor Foy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not voting member.
But you have speaking right.
I do, thank you. So I have three questions all about implementation and resourcing. So the three aspects are PIMs, given they're going to have to understand the new district plan when it comes into effect, when it's proposed, the engineering standards, so our engineers and resourcing for that, because that is usually a key bottleneck for the council, and three, compliance. So there's no point in having any rules if we're not enforcing them, and if our council is not resourcing that. And also because the RMA has really highlighted that is one of the aspects that it's going to be increasing its teeth on.
Okay. Louise, are you happy to take a stab at that, or Rochelle, or?
I can answer part of that. With regard to compliance, the district plan team is working with us to make sure that compliance officers have training in the use of the new district plan and how to do monitoring and enforcement when we're operating an operative plan and a proposed plan at the same time. So that training has been initiated. I can't really answer your question about engineering standards and PIMs, but happy to go and do some research, or perhaps Michelle and Dean might be able to take that one.
Well, the engineering standards, Annie may want to comment through you, Madam Chair. The engineering standards are being revised, and the updates to our practitioners forum, and we have another one on the 28th of May up in Kaitaia. There are updates on the engineering standards and allowing our practitioners and people out there who make applications to council to be informed as to what the new engineering standards look like. The work that was done specifically on the engineering standards, Andy may want to comment on, because I don't think I'm that familiar with the detail of that.
So through the Chair, comments have been made around the progress and timeline for the engineering standards is valid. I think there is a broader conversation around how we enforce the engineering standards in our communities, and it's similar to the RMA conversation. Of course, at the moment, we do only have a broad oversight of the work of developers, particularly on the engineering side. So there is a broader conversation that we need to have going forward.
Thank you for that, Andy. Also, So the resource consents compliance information is reported quarterly at this committee meeting. It's not on this agenda today, so I don't know if it's on the next one or the one after. Yeah. So I think it is after July, the next time we get that report on resource consent compliance and everything resource consents apart from the
June.
oh, it's in June. It's on the June agenda, Felicity. Yeah, we just had it in March. Well,
Thank you, Andrew. The reason I bring up about PIMS is that's a planning check of building consent. So every single building consent goes through a planning check. You can imagine the huge bottleneck that will cause if the, number one, it's not resourced sufficiently, or number two, the training hasn't occurred in advance.
So, Madam Chair, the PIM checks are important because more often than not, a building consent on its own isn't the only requirement. PIM check triggers the need for resource consent, and then obviously our resource consents team gets involved in considering applications and so on. The resourcing question is a very difficult one to answer right now. We know that with change, that will bring extra demand, and I would suggest that we bring reports when we are more confident and in a position to advise you as to what the implications of that might look like. We are under some pressure in our resource consenting engineering area. We have 3 engineers at the moment, and they have significant workload. And then there's also other workload that sits outside of the resource consents team, where they are dependent on roading engineering advice from NTA or other advice with regards to stormwater or other impacts. So it is a package, and it doesn't all sit within the resource consents team. It is a matter of dependency on receiving timely input. Otherwise, that whole statutory compliance, the 20 days, is under stress, because the team can put certain applications on hold, but they cannot do that in all instances and are reliant on inputs from other sources. So the resourcing part of it is a challenge, and we will bring a report specifically at some point to highlight to you what that might look like, particularly in context of the change.
thank you. Great. I'm going to put this report. Oh, sorry. Did I miss you? Sorry. I wrote the name down.
I know. Thank you, Madam Chair. The first point I wanted to make was just in regards to spatial planning. Local Government New Zealand are hosting a spatial planning symposium on Friday virtually for anybody who is able to attend / wants to attend. My questions have partially been covered, and they're also around resourcing and around the cross-referencing between...
Can I just interrupt you?
So on page 29, I really want to commend the report writer. Thank you, Louise, for the list of what we need to consider at FNDC. That's a really great list for us at a governance level. What I'd like to see going forward is, what are we going to do about that list? So we've identified it. Now what are we going to do about it? Because that's cross-organisation. That's across the departments. So that was the first point I wanted to raise. Especially given the reference in the compliance schedule, and it's a really well completed compliance schedule as well, so thank you for that. But there is a reference to there being an implication of this report to the FNDC district plan. So just again highlighting what Councillor Foy has brought up, that crossing and how we're going to manage that going forward. The second point I wanted to raise, and Dr. Myberg, I hear what you're saying about the resourcing. My concern is on page 30 it states resources will be required across multiple departments to prepare for significant changes signalled prior to the end of 2022. My concern with that is the timing. We deliberate on our long-term plan next week. To my awareness, we haven't allowed for this additional resourcing within our planning of year 1 of the LTP. I hear that you say that further reports will come back. However, that's just for this department. And when we start looking at the entire organisation, I am concerned that we're not gearing up there. I'm aware I can't get an answer to that now, but it would be good to have that conversation offline. I don't want to adopt our LTP and then understand that we're going to have to increase our resourcing to be able to cover these changes. So just raising those 2 points. Otherwise, thank you for the report.
Good. Madam Chair, if I may, as you are aware, Council approved some additional resourcing probably 2 years ago now, and we are under the working under the umbrella of the direction of the Chief Executive, where we are not adding resources in a willy-nilly fashion, and we are looking to manage within existing budgets, salary budgets and other operational budgets. So we are looking to professional fees, for example, to offset, to see whether we can source advice externally and manage that within the existing budgets. Where additional resources, in-house additional resources are required, we need to do that in a very cautious fashion. We don't want to gear up in a way where we are over-resourced, arguably, over-resourced for what we need to do. Being under-resourced is a challenge. We will certainly bring advice in the form of further reports. As far as the LTP is concerned, we wouldn't want to build in a quantum of resource funding, I'll call it that, which may or may not be required. Now, on the one hand, that may seem short-sighted in terms of included, err on the side of including it rather than not, but there's so many variables here that I think we need to work through internally first what that might look like, get a clearer view of what our budgets can manage in terms of the offsets and the operational detail of that, and then if we find that we've shortchanged ourselves in some way, that we actually do bring that to the table. We're just erring on the side of caution here in terms of not wanting to gear up for something that may look quite different, and then not be in a position to manage that appropriately. So it is a difficult one, but we certainly will keep you as the governance team advised as to what that might look like. It may well need some consideration as part of a future annual plan.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. That's great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Anybody again? I will put that report. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so now we have item 5.2, and the motion is, the recommendation is that the Regulatory Compliance Committee receive the report, Environmental Health Services Food Licensing Update. Can I have a mover?
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Councillor Smith and Councillor Busick, seconder. Thank you. And anybody have any questions? No questions. Wow. Okay.
Well, I do have a question. I've got it marked there, but it's really just in terms of staffing. I just keep looking at the report and it's saying that we're not using outside groups or supporting councils, and I'm just wondering, are we fully staffed? Dr. Dean, and therefore we're working in terms of the managing the workload?
In the environmental health area, I believe we are, but perhaps Rochelle can comment on resourcing, staffing and other resources. I believe we are in a position to manage this well. Can't remember whether there are any vacancies through you, Madam Chair, currently.
Chair, no, so we are fully staffed in that area. We have, this team manages both food verifications and the alcohol liquor licensing, and we have got only 3 qualified environmental health officers doing the whole district, which is a challenge. And we have got 2 environmental technical officers who are taking on the other sides of health, which include the good host visits for alcohol, the campgrounds, the hairdressers, and all of the other health inspections. And so we're hoping to sort of free up the time for the environmental health officers going to do these food verifications. So they have a high workload. We're going to need the 3, but they are managing that workload at the moment.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank you.
Okay, I did have comments about this report. I noted there were a number of corrective actions to be taken, and there's some due dates within the IAN's report. So is everything tracking well to meet those?
Yes. So I would like to say that the IAN's report it was a really great outcome for the team, and so these are very minor cars that were identified. The team was credited for the work that they had done. There were 3 non-conformance acts were identified, and action plans have been developed and they've been accepted by the MPI for those.
Yep.
The 2, there was a matrix and a what was the other one?
Update the quality manual.
That's right. So those have all been done.
Yep.
And when they do it won't be an external, it'll be an internal audit in January of next year. Those will be accepted within that. So.
I was also wondering about there was something in there about the information needing to be updated on the website. The link took people to the old system. Yeah, we got onto that.
Absolutely. So that's corrected as far as I'm aware. It was done immediately, I believe.
Great. Awesome. Cool. That's all I had. Did anybody else have anything? No? Okay. I'm going to put that report. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you. Okay, now moving on to item 5.3. And the recommendation is that the Regulatory Compliance Committee receive the report BCA Regulatory Compliance Update. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Smith, Member Ward. Awesome. And we are waiting for
Trent Blakeman.
Trent Blakeman.
He's in the field, Madam Chair, and he's just signalled that he will join us via Teams to answer any questions that you may have. So I can talk to the item in general terms if you wish.
Yep, that'd be great. Thank you.
Madam Chair, through you, the Building Compliance or Building Services team, as it's known, is doing particularly well on all fronts, both in terms of putting getting building consents out the door in 20 statutory days, the CCC Code of Compliance certificates as well, high performing in terms of high percentages of compliance, 99.4, 99.6%, those kinds of figures. Is the odd one that might slip for whatever reason, but we are very close on a consistent basis of putting out the building consents or CCCs and meeting those statutory requirements. So there are no areas of concern as such. I think the statistics speak for themselves, and we're confident that we can approach the October 21 check, and that's what it is. It's not an audit. It's a check that's been signalled and offered by IANS, International Accreditation New Zealand. They will work with us and offer us interim feedback, if you like, through an assessment, a desktop exercise, not an audit. And we believe that will certainly assist us on the way forward through to October 22, when the new full-blown external audit is done. So things are tracking very nicely within the Trent Blakeman's with us now.
Yes.
So if there are any questions, then happy to answer those, and Trent may be able to answer the more specific questions.
Okay, so Trent's online. If you've got any questions in relation to building consents, please. Councillor Foy.
Yeah. So opportune for me to be here. I would just want to ask about inspection timeframes for the Te Haku area, and I've always asked this question. I ring up and I ask when the next inspection is. So I've been told at the moment it's up to 9 working days to book an inspection in Te Haku at the moment, and I'm wondering if there's a resource issue in the Te Haku area. This has been done previously.
Doesn't sound right, but Trent will know the numbers better than I do. It was around 4 days maximum the last time I had an update. Trent, through you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, look, I can probably speak to that. And I guess whenever I hear something like that, I go to my team leader and ask the question. Normally, I find that it's nowhere near that high, but as to resourcing issues, look, we're experiencing a very high number of consents at the moment. We have a number of staff members away on sick leave. We also have our training that takes place. I think we've got 2 guys away this week from memory. So all that kind of stuff puts strain on our ability or the resources to do consents and inspections. We've actually just hired a new guy up north for doing inspections in the far north. So we're trying to fill the gaps in resourcing up there. But again, last time I checked, we were within 48 hours. So I'll have to go away and see whether there's any truth to that, Felicity.
Thank you. I look forward to the follow-up, or else the people who told me are incorrect. They tried to book an inspection yesterday and that's what they were told.
Okay. We'll follow that up. And Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question, just a thank you for this report once again, Trent. I did want to acknowledge, though, at the bottom of page 52, Council has rolled out the new customer satisfaction software, Ask Nicely, and Building Services has the highest number of return surveys to date, with a current score of 4.2 out of 5 for April. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and commend that through you, Dr. Myberg, and to Trent and the team. That's a fantastic result, so thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, quick question.
Oh, yes, Councillor
Yeah, thank you, Trent. Now that you're here, I'm going to ask a question. Yes, I noted that too, and that's great to see that you rolled out some systems there. You mentioned that in a question, I see you hired a new staff member. Well, I heard you mention it. There's a 27% increase overall.
Yep.
So it sounds like you're handling that increase all right with the efficiency gains you've received. Is that correct? And where has the increases mostly been?
Look, it's just purely in consents, and if we've got time, I do have some slides which show the graph of received consents. And on last year, you see the increases are quite remarkable, actually. It was the opposite of what we kind of predicted. But look, in the way of resourcing, I've gone to the procurement board. We're currently looking at bringing another resource on board, as well as we're currently looking at 2 future doing interviews at the moment for new BCOs. One of those, I've actually been successful, I think, in one of those roles, which will bring resource immediately in the team. It is about a month out, though, which is we're doing okay, we're managing, but I've got to tell you it's a bit of a strain. We are noticing the increase in consents, most definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Trent. This has been one of our highest risk items over the years, so I'm happy for you to show those slides. I know everyone's eager to get moving on to the next kaupapa, but please show us the slides. Okay,
so we'll launch straight into it. Obviously, you're very familiar with the theme. I'll just share my screen, which is... Actually, I'm not sure whether I can... It's not showing that I can share my screen for some reason.
We don't have time for not sure. You might... Do you want to email them to Marlima?
I can do, yeah. Look, I don't have that functionality on my screen to actually share my screen with you, so I don't know why that is. But I can definitely...
To Marlima.
Marlima.
Will do.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
Can I just highlight for the Chief Executive, who I know is thinking about a workshop on enabling housing in response to the government's recent directive in regard to resourcing an increase in construction in the far north. It just is a consideration that would need to be factored in amongst a million others, that it remains top of your mind.
Madam Chair, just to that point, while the slides have been loaded, Kainga Ora have their own BCA now, and we are working with them to enable a process. It's referred to as consentium. It's where they will send building information through to us for the record, for the property file, and for the LIM. So we will soon find ourselves in a position where Kainga Ora, through their BCA function, will be working alongside council to take up some of that volume of consenting that's coming through. But the point is well made that we need to be geared up for future volumes. And with housing, we foresee a situation that we will have to join forces with others, consortium through the mechanism that Kaina Ora are using to inform us of their processing and results on the processing side and consents issued. But certainly we will need to expect some kind of a housing surge and therefore a demand side that will be coming. So Trent and I have discussed that, and again we'll have to watch that very closely and bring reports to allow for the surge.
Madam Chair, if I may, that leads to another question, and that is
No, I think I've done it. Yeah, there's no on my.
I can hear you.
And that is in regard to if we have another organisation, Kainga Roa, operating their own building consent authority process. At the moment, the legislation is currently written, leaves the ratepayer as the last man standing in the event that there's a claim against a failed building consent or a leaky house. So we would need to see some surety that there was not a by default liability applied to the ratepayer.
Madam Chair, the Kaina Ora will be audited just like we are by IANZ. So as a BCA, they are no different from us, and they'll be subject to the same stringent scrutiny that we get through IANZ audits. And then we obviously need to, the liability sits with them for anything that flows through. So we will hold the record of the property file and the result of the inspection, or the processing that is done. And at the end of the day, they are liable for anything that might flow through subsequently.
That's good to hear.
How are we going? Apologies, Madam Chair. The email has come through, but our security system here has blocked the attachment from coming.
Oh no. Okay. We're going to have to forego the slides.
Then ask some questions. I have 3 questions, and I'm not normally on this committee.
Are they building consent related?
They're infrastructure and planning related between the different departments. We've highlighted this morning how sometimes we can work in silos. I just wanted to raise those issues while I was here.
Yeah, well, we've got
3 things.
Go for it.
So, number 1, in June, in the reporting, what I'll be interested to see is any Section 37s and the reasons for those, particularly relating to comments, timeframes for NTA comments or engineering comments from the infrastructure department. That highlights a resourcing issue, and people should not have their timeframes doubled because for those reasons, in my opinion. So that's one thing that as the other elections should be looking at.
I do have that in the work program.
Yeah, and so the reasons for that will be important to interrelate with infrastructure. Number 2, infrastructure committee, we're looking at having a connections policy. So currently we don't have that. So there's no governance oversight, and the area of benefit and the method in which we allow people to connect or not hasn't changed in a number of years. And that highlights the risk, particularly with changing our zones. So if we have a connections policy, it becomes clear to the applicant who's wanting to connect, and also to staff, and also importantly reviewing area of benefit. And lastly, I wanted to highlight that our council is different to the council. The infrastructure team is separate to the policy team and the regulatory team. So in terms of planning for growth in our new district plan and the regulatory functions we operate, they are in a completely different building, completely different location, and they, in my opinion, and it's clear, they are focusing on consent renewals for existing infrastructure plants, like sewage plants, and haven't been focused on planning for growth, and that's reflective without becoming new district plans, lack of those policies. So I want to highlight that between the different silos in our council.
Thank you for that. I'm not expecting anybody to respond to that. I'm sure that your committee tomorrow, they can tidy it up there.
Trying to get it on our
Oh
screen.
yeah, we've got the slides.
Oh, you did.
Yeah. She's just putting it up.
No pressure at all.
Mr. Blakeman, next one,
Yes.
can you send it through before the meeting,
Sure can.
please?
Can I just ask just a general question? I'm always interested, to me, part of the supply and housing problem will be resolved by building houses and factories, prefabs or whatever you want to call them, and then delivering them to the site. What could be the implications for building inspection if we have more of that going on? Could be a inspected factory or completion or...
Through the chair, currently through MBIA is doing there's a bunch of legislation that's been rewritten. One of those things is based around providing a manufacturer's certificate to those kind of manufacturers who build a prefabricated house. So our council will provide feedback on that, and basically what will happen is, as a manufacturer of like any other product, they will certify that product themselves for when it leaves the factory to be compliant with the building code, and then we'll simply sign off and get a building consent for the foundations, wastewater system, or the services on the actual site. So I believe as we move forward in the building industry and those kind of buildings become more prolific, that's probably the way it will go, I would say.
Thanks, Trent.
The ground level stuff and not below ground. Cool, thanks.
Okay, we've got your slides.
Fantastic.
Fire away.
So they're pretty self-explanatory. If we can move to slide 2, please. So this slide shows our forecast for the year, which was on 1,465 cents. As you can see, we're basically 2 months away from the end of the year, and we've already cracked 1,488. So we're going to be way past our forecast for the year. If we could have slide number 3, please. Now, this is the graph I spoke about earlier. So the blue line is last year's BCs received. As you can see from January, so February, March and April, we far exceed our consents from last year, and overall 4-year averages, we're 20% higher on those to date. So that's quite considerable. And, you know, it does put a bit of a strain on the BCA's resources, but we are coping. We are coping, which is good. If we can go to the next slide, please. Once again, I tote this all gets pretty boring. We're at 100%, which is what we actually want. As you can see, that continues. So I'm happy to be bored.
Boring's good.
Boring's good. That's right. Next slide, please. So we're at 99.6%. So that's. I'm pretty happy. Team's doing a fabulous job. Next slide, please. CCCs. Obviously, CCCs have trailed a bit, but the work we're doing in that space is fantastic. We're sitting at 98.64% at the moment, so we're very happy with that. Next slide, please. And this just shows the same thing. We did have an issue, which I mentioned. We had a blind spot in our reporting, which caused, you'll see through December, January and February, we had a few consent slides through non-compliant, and that's basically because we were blind to them. We've since resolved that problem, and you can see through March and April now we're back up to 100%. So I guess the key thing about this slide that's really important, it actually shows that our quality assurance system is working really well. So that's an indication of the health of the BCA. So that's fantastic. Next slide, please. Questions?
Right, I think we've covered questions, but anybody have anything arise from those slides? Thank you very much, Trent. We have one question from Councillor
Very quick question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that, Trent. My question is around when I've looked at trends for building consents per region across New Zealand, I believe it's MBIE, they measure it as per 10% of the population. And I noticed that Whānau's District Council tracked well below that trend traditionally. Is that something that your team measures in terms of how we're tracking in that space?
No, I don't say no. I'd say no to that. I'm not that I'm aware of. Not something we look at.
Thank you.
Is it something we should look at? No.
We can consider it going forward. I might look a little bit further.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, through you. On a comparative basis, of course, we can look at the national trends, etc., regional trends. I think it's probably more meaningful in a Northland context to see what's going on. I think it's true to say, and Trent can verify this, our consent numbers in the far north exceed those in the other two districts to the south. Trent, can you confirm?
I believe they do, Dean. That's correct.
Yeah. So that's an indicator.
Okay, everybody. All those in favour of accepting that report? Aye. Aye. Wow, look at that. We've come to the end of our Regulatory and Compliance Committee meeting. After I've done the closing karakia, I am going to give you each a copy of the updated Regulatory and Compliance Work Programme. In your spare time, can you feedback anything on that? And then I also forwarded out to you all the February workshop information, responses, sorry. So nobody's replied to that, but if you have any feedback on it, please feed it back to Dean or I, and we'll look ahead to having another workshop. Maybe there's some items we need to include in the work program going forward. But yeah, feed in so that it's not just me making that decision, it's the whole committee. All right, I'll do our closing karakia. Thank you. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whaia tō tātou ariki, o ehe karaite, me te aroha, me te atua, me te whiwhinga tākitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.